The massive arena stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal floors, its dome reaching so high that artificial clouds drifted near the ceiling. Commander Zarathek of the Vorthon Empire adjusted her forearms as she watched the latest batch of newcomers enter through the massive gates. Her scaled hide rippled with amusement as she observed the small delegation from the recently discovered planet called Earth. "Look at them," she hissed to her aide, pointing one clawed finger toward the group of humans walking nervously across the arena floor. "So small, so fragile. Their skin looks like it would tear if you breathed on it too hard." The humans numbered 12 in total, dressed in what appeared to be simple cloth uniforms. They moved with an awkward uncertainty that made several of the watching alien species burst into laughter. Above them, in the viewing galleries that spiraled around the arena's walls, thousands of representatives from across the galaxy had gathered to witness what many considered would be the shortest combat trials in recent memory. Admiral Korlex of the Crystalline Confederation leaned forward in his floating observation pod, his translucent body shimmering with barely contained mirth. "I heard their planet only recently achieved faster-than-light travel," he said to his companions. "They probably think this is some kind of diplomatic meeting." The arena's central platform rose from the floor, carrying with it the Trial Master, a being so ancient that nobody remembered which species he originally belonged to. His voice boomed across the space, translated instantly into every known language by the arena's systems. "Representatives of the Galactic Combat Council," the Trial Master announced, "we gather today to evaluate the newest candidates for military alliance. The species known as humans from the 3rd planet of the Sol system request membership in our coalition." A wave of snickers rippled through the galleries. The Krex warriors, standing nearly 3 meters tall with armored carapaces that could deflect plasma bolts, flexed their massive claws in what passed for their version of laughter. The Ethereal Collective, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form centuries ago, pulsed with colors that their translator indicated as mockery. Down on the arena floor, Captain Sarah Chen of Earth's Special Operations Command tried to maintain her composure as she felt the weight of thousands of alien eyes upon her team. She had trained for this moment for 3 years, ever since Earth's first contact with the galactic community had revealed the existence of the combat trials. To join the Galactic Military Alliance, every species had to prove their worth in combat against the established powers. "Remember what we discussed," she whispered to her team through their communication devices. "Let them underestimate us. It's exactly what we want." Behind her, the other 11 members of Earth's delegation remained silent. To the watching aliens, they appeared to be a random collection of humans, some tall, some short, some appearing young, and others older. None of them looked particularly impressive by galactic standards. They carried no visible weapons, wore no armor, and showed none of the obvious physical enhancements that most warrior species displayed. General Thaxor of the militant horde raised his massive frame from his seat. Standing 4 meters tall and covered in natural armor plating that had deflected everything from asteroid impacts to stellar radiation, he was considered one of the greatest warriors in the galaxy. "Trial Master," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the arena. "Surely this is some kind of mistake. These creatures look like they would struggle to lift our smallest weapons, let alone use them in combat." The Trial Master's ancient eyes, which had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, focused on the human delegation. "The laws of the combat trials are clear, General Thaxor. Every species that requests membership must be given the opportunity to prove themselves. Size and appearance are not the only measures of warrior capability. But look at them," screeched High Priestess Vexara of the Shadow Realm, her dark energy form crackling with disdain. "They have no natural weapons, no armor, no psychic abilities that we can detect. What could they possibly offer to our military alliance?" Captain Chen felt her jaw tighten, but she maintained her neutral expression. She had expected this reaction. Earth's intelligence had provided detailed reports about the galaxy's various warrior species, and humans indeed seemed pitifully weak by comparison. They couldn't breathe in toxic atmospheres like the Vorthons, couldn't phase through solid matter like the Shadow Realm inhabitants, and certainly couldn't punch through battle tank armor with their bare hands like the Krex. But intelligence reports also revealed something interesting about the galactic military mindset. For all their power and advanced technology, most alien species had grown comfortable with direct, overwhelming force. Subtlety and deception were concepts largely forgotten in a galaxy where raw power typically determined victory. The trial master gestured toward a series of platforms that rose from the arena floor. The preliminary assessments will begin shortly. Each team will face challenges designed to test their combat capabilities, strategic thinking, and adaptation under pressure. As the platforms took shape, revealing obstacle courses that would challenge even the most enhanced beings, more laughter echoed from the galleries. The courses included sections that required lifting massive stone blocks, others that demanded surviving in environments that would kill most carbon-based life forms, and combat scenarios against holographic opponents wielding advanced weaponry. "This is almost sad," murmured Ambassador Kreltik of the Pacifist Union, one of the few species present that had joined the military alliance for defensive purposes only. "Those humans will be eliminated in the first challenge." Captain Chen allowed herself a small smile as she watched her team members subtly position themselves around the arena floor. To untrained eyes, they appeared to be milling about randomly, but she could see the precise formation taking shape. 3 years of preparation had led to this moment, and while the galaxy's warriors focused on the humans' apparent weaknesses, they completely failed to notice the subtle signs that marked them as something far more dangerous than they appeared. Behind Chen, Master Takeshi Yamamoto stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his weathered face showing no emotion despite the mockery raining down from above. At 63 years old, he appeared to be the least threatening member of the human delegation, but the 8 individuals flanking him moved with a fluid grace that spoke of decades of training in arts the galaxy had never encountered. The laughter of the alien warriors continued to echo through the arena as the trial master began explaining the rules of engagement. None of them suspected that Earth had sent not just soldiers to prove humanity's worth, but practitioners of the oldest and most lethal combat arts their planet had ever developed. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of making their enemies underestimate them until it was far too late. The first challenge materialized before them like a nightmare designed by committee. The obstacle course stretched across half the arena floor, featuring walls of gleaming metal that stood 20 meters high, pits filled with acidic mist that would dissolve most known materials, and rotating barriers armed with energy weapons that fired automatically at anything that moved. Commander Zarathek watched from her elevated position as the first team approached the starting line. The Krex warriors moved forward with their characteristic confidence, their armored shells gleaming under the arena's lights. The largest of them, battle leader Grexmol, stood at the course's entrance and simply walked forward. The first wall, which would have required most species to find handholds or use climbing equipment, crumbled under his assault. Grexmol punched through the metal like it was wet paper, creating a hole large enough for his team to follow. When they reached the acid pits, they simply leaped across distances that would have been impossible for smaller beings. The energy weapons that tracked their movement bounced harmlessly off their natural armor. Completion time, 4 minutes, 37 seconds, announced the trial master's voice across the arena. Cheers erupted from the Krex delegation in the galleries. Several other warrior species nodded approvingly. This was the standard they expected from military allies. Overwhelming force applied with precision and speed. The Vorthan team went next, and their approach showcased why they had conquered 12 star systems. Using their forearms, they scaled the walls with incredible speed while their thick hides protected them from the acid mist. Their completion time was even faster, 3 minutes, 51 seconds. More applause thundered through the arena. Ambassador Kreltik shook his head sadly as he watched the human team finally approach the starting line. "They should withdraw now," he said to his aide. At least they could leave with some dignity intact. Captain Chen stood at the course entrance with her team arranged behind her. She could feel the weight of expectation, not for success but for spectacular failure. The alien spectators had grown quiet, not from suspense but from the anticipation of watching something amusing. "Standard approach," she said quietly to her team. "Remember, we're supposed to be ordinary soldiers." The humans began their attempt at the obstacle course, and immediately, the differences between them and the previous teams became painfully obvious. Where the Krex had punched through walls, the humans had to search for handholds and climb slowly. Where the Vorthans had leaped across acid pits, the humans had to work together to span the gaps using makeshift bridges created from their equipment. The energy weapons, which had barely slowed the armored Kreks, forced the humans to take cover and advance carefully. Captain Chen deliberately made her movements look clumsy as she rolled behind a barrier. Though anyone trained in combat tactics would have recognized the efficiency of her positioning. "Look at them," laughed General Thaxor, his voice booming across the arena. "They move like frightened younglings. How long do you think before one of them gets hit by the energy weapons?" As if summoned by his words, one of the humans suddenly cried out and fell to the ground, clutching his leg. The energy weapon had grazed him, and while it wasn't a lethal hit, it was clearly painful. His teammates gathered around him, and for several long seconds they appeared to be arguing about whether to continue. High Priestess Vexara's dark energy form practically vibrated with amusement. "They're actually considering retreat from the first challenge. I've never seen anything so pathetic." The injured human was Private Martinez, and his performance was Academy Award worthy. He limped dramatically as his teammates helped him to his feet, making it appear that they were only continuing out of stubborn pride rather than tactical thinking. When they finally reached the acid pits, the humans' approach looked desperate rather than strategic. They threw pieces of their equipment across the gaps to create improvised bridges, testing each one carefully before trusting their weight to it. What appeared to be fearful hesitation was actually Master Yamamoto and his students, silently identifying the precise, structural points that would support their passage, while maintaining the illusion of struggle. 17 minutes, 42 seconds, the trial master announced when the last human finally crossed the finish line. The silence that followed was broken by scattered laughter and a few mocking cheers. The human team had not only failed to impress anyone, they had actively reinforced every negative assumption about their species' combat capabilities. Admiral Corlex floated down from his observation pod to address the trial master directly. "Surely we can end this charade now," he said, his crystalline body reflecting the arena lights in patterns that indicated extreme disdain. "These humans are clearly not military material. They struggled with a basic obstacle course that our cadets complete for morning exercise." The trial master's ancient eyes showed no emotion as he responded. "The combat trials consist of 7 phases. All species are entitled to complete each phase before final judgment is rendered." 7 phases. Commander Zarathek's voice carried clearly across the arena. "They'll be lucky to survive the second one." On the arena floor, Captain Chen gathered her team around her in what appeared to be a desperate strategy session. To the watching aliens, it looked like 12 humans trying to figure out how to avoid complete humiliation. In reality, it was a carefully choreographed meeting where Master Yamamoto's subtle hand signals communicated tactical adjustments to his students. "Phase 2 will commence in 10 minutes, the trial master announced. "Combat assessment against holographic opponents." The humans looked at each other with expressions that the aliens interpreted as fear. Several species in the galleries began placing bets on how quickly the humans would be eliminated. The odds were not favorable. As the holographic combat arena materialized around them, complete with artificial terrain and weather effects, the humans spread out in what looked like a panicked attempt to find cover. The holographic opponents that appeared were modeled after actual galactic warriors, Krek soldiers, Vorthan strike teams, and Shadow Realm assassins. The first human to engage the holograms was Corporal Johnson, who charged directly at a holographic Krek's warrior, with what appeared to be reckless abandon. The hologram easily batted him aside, and Johnson went flying across the artificial battlefield to land in an undignified heap. "This is painful to watch," muttered battle leader Grexmal to his companions. "How did these creatures ever achieve spaceflight?" What the aliens couldn't see was that Johnson's apparent reckless charge had served a very specific purpose. As he accidentally tumbled across the battlefield, he was actually mapping the exact response patterns and attack ranges of each holographic opponent. His seemingly clumsy movements provided crucial intelligence that Master Yamamoto's team would use in the later phases. One by one, the humans were systematically defeated by the holographic opponents. Each defeat looked realistic, complete with dramatic falls and pained expressions. But each defeat also revealed more information about galactic combat doctrine, weapons capabilities, and tactical preferences. "Final score, humans eliminated," the trial master announced. 0 successful engagements recorded. The laughter from the galleries was now openly contemptuous. Even the more diplomatic species were shaking their heads in what appeared to be embarrassment for the human delegation. Master Yamamoto helped the last of his defeated students to his feet, his weathered face showing what the aliens interpreted as shame and disappointment. In reality, his slight nod indicated satisfaction with the intelligence they had gathered. The galaxy's warriors had just provided a complete demonstration of their capabilities, tactics and weaknesses, all while believing they were simply watching humans embarrass themselves. Phase 3 would begin soon, and it was then that the real assessment would start. The third phase of the combat trials began with the materialization of the Shadow Maze, a testing ground that had humbled even experienced galactic warriors. The arena floor transformed into a complex labyrinth of shifting walls, hidden passages, and zones of absolute darkness where most species would be rendered completely blind. "Now this will be entertaining," Admiral Corlex observed, his crystalline form gleaming with anticipation. "The Shadow Maze tests stealth, navigation, and survival instincts. Even our best teams struggle with it." The maze stretched across the entire arena floor, its walls reaching 30 meters into the air, and constructed from a material that absorbed most forms of electromagnetic radiation. Sensor equipment was rendered useless within its confines, and the shifting nature of the passages meant that mapping was nearly impossible. Commander Zarathek leaned forward in her seat as she watched the Vorthon team enter the maze first. "The Vorthons have excellent night vision and natural climbing abilities," she explained to her aide. "They should complete this challenge in under an hour." The viewing screens around the arena showed the Vorthon progress through thermal imaging, since conventional cameras were useless in the maze's darkness. The four-armed aliens moved efficiently through the passages, using their superior strength to climb over obstacles and their enhanced senses to navigate the shifting paths. When they emerged from the maze's exit point 43 minutes later, carrying the 3 objective markers they had been tasked to retrieve, the alien spectators responded with respectful applause. It was an impressive time that few teams had matched. The Krex warriors took a more direct approach, using their tremendous strength to simply smash through walls when the passages became too narrow or complex. Their completion time was slower at 57 minutes, but their demonstration of raw power earned appreciative growls from their species delegation. Then came the humans' turn. Master Yamamoto approached, the maze entrance with his 11 companions following in single file. To the watching aliens, they appeared nervous and uncertain, whispering among themselves in what sounded like panicked discussions about strategy. "They'll be lost within minutes," predicted battle leader Grexmol. "Humans have poor night vision and no natural navigation instincts." As the human team disappeared into the maze's darkness, the thermal imaging screens showed them moving much more slowly than the previous teams. They appeared to be feeling their way along walls, occasionally bumping into obstacles, and frequently stopping to whisper among themselves. What the aliens couldn't detect was that the whispered discussions were actually Master Yamamoto and his students communicating through a combination of subtle hand signals and breathing patterns that had been developed over centuries of ninja training. They weren't feeling their way blindly through the maze. They were systematically mapping every passage, secret door, and hidden mechanism. "They've been wandering in circles for 20 minutes, laughed High Priestess Vexara. "This is almost sad to watch." But Ambassador Kreltik, whose species had evolved from prey animals and retained highly developed pattern recognition abilities, was beginning to notice something unusual. "Are they really wandering?" he asked his aide quietly. "Look at their movement pattern more carefully." On the screens, the human team appeared to be lost and confused, but their seemingly random wandering was actually following a very specific path. They were exploring every dead end, investigating every hidden passage and testing every mechanism in the maze. What looked like confusion was actually the most thorough reconnaissance any team had ever conducted. At the 30-minute mark, something strange happened. The thermal imaging lost track of 3 of the humans for several seconds. When they reappeared on the screens, they were in completely different sections of the maze. "Equipment malfunction," Commander Zarathek's aide suggested, but she was studying the readings more carefully. "No," she said slowly. "The thermal imaging is functioning normally. Those humans just moved through sections of the maze that our sensors couldn't track them through." The impossible became routine as the human team continued their progress. They seemed to vanish and reappear at will, sometimes moving through areas that the maze's designers had believed were completely inaccessible. When they encountered the maze's guardian constructs, mechanical sentinels designed to eliminate intruders, the humans didn't fight them directly like previous teams had done. Instead, they seemed to simply avoid them entirely. The constructs, equipped with advanced sensors and programmed with the combat patterns of every known galactic species, appeared to be unable to detect the humans at all. "This is impossible," General Thaxor rumbled, his massive frame shifting uneasily in his seat. "Those constructs can track a Krex warrior through solid rock. How are they missing creatures as large as humans?" Master Yamamoto's students moved through the maze like ghosts, their centuries of training in the art of invisibility serving them perfectly in an environment designed to challenge conventional stealth techniques. They had studied the Guardian constructs during the previous team's runs, identifying the exact frequencies and movement patterns the machines used for detection. The first objective marker was retrieved by someone the thermal sensors never detected at all. It simply disappeared from its heavily guarded location and reappeared in the possession of the human team. The second marker vanished from a room that the humans had never officially entered. The third was taken from a chamber that was supposed to be impossible to access without triggering massive defense systems. Completion time, 28 minutes, 14 seconds, the trial master announced. The silence that followed was deafening. Every alien species in the arena stared at the displays in disbelief. The humans had not only completed the shadow maze, they had done it faster than any team in the recorded history of the combat trials. "Check the equipment," Admiral Corlex demanded. "Run full diagnostics on all tracking systems." "All systems are functioning normally," the trial master replied calmly. "The human team has successfully completed the third phase." Commander Zarathek stood slowly, her forearms trembling slightly. "How?" she asked, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet arena. "Our best infiltration specialist can't move that efficiently through the shadow maze." Captain Chen emerged from the maze with her team, all of them maintaining the appearance of surprised relief, as if they couldn't believe they had actually succeeded. But Ambassador Kreltik noticed something the warrior species missed. The humans weren't surprised at all. Their body language showed satisfaction, not shock. "There must be an explanation," Battle Leader Grexmol growled. "No species achieves that level of stealth capability without specialized evolution or technological enhancement." Master Yamamoto bowed respectfully toward the viewing galleries, a gesture that the aliens interpreted as humble gratitude. In reality, it was acknowledgement that Phase 3 had gone exactly according to plan. His students had revealed just enough of their true capabilities to make the galaxy's warriors uncertain, while still concealing the full extent of what they could do. High Priestess Vexara's dark energy form flickered with confusion and anger. "This changes nothing," she declared, though her voice lacked its previous confidence. "Stealth is only one aspect of warfare. The remaining phases will test their actual combat effectiveness." But doubt had been planted. The humans had gone from laughably incompetent to mysteriously efficient in the span of one challenge. As the arena prepared for Phase 4, many of the galaxy's greatest warriors found themselves reconsidering their assumptions about Earth's seemingly harmless delegation. The laughter had stopped completely now, replaced by an uncomfortable silence as the implications of what they had witnessed began to sink in. The humans hadn't just succeeded in the shadow maze, they had redefined what success looked like. Phase 4 of the combat trials introduced the strategy simulation, a holographic battlefield where teams faced complex tactical scenarios that had been derived from actual galactic conflicts. The arena floor transformed into a three-dimensional display showing a besieged space station surrounded by enemy forces, with the challenge being to devise and execute a rescue operation for trapped civilians. General Thaxor stood to address the assembly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had actually fought in the historical battle being simulated. "This scenario is based on the siege of Keth Prime," he announced. 12,000 civilians were trapped when the Void Syndicate attacked the mining station. "It took our combined fleet 6 days to break through their defenses," the alien spectators murmured appreciatively. The siege of Keth Prime was legendary among military circles, requiring the coordination of 7 different species fleets and resulting in one of the most complex rescue operations ever attempted. Commander Zarathek studied the holographic display with professional interest. The defensive perimeter consists of 47 Void Syndicate cruisers, asteroid-based weapon platforms, and minefields. The civilian shelters will lose life support in 8 hours simulation time. The Crystalline Confederation team approached the simulation first, their translucent forms shimmering as they analyzed the tactical display. As beings of pure energy, they could process information at incredible speeds, calculating multiple attack vectors simultaneously. Direct assault on the primary shield generators. Admiral Corlex announced their strategy. Overwhelming force applied to the weakest defensive points, while secondary teams established corridor security for evacuation craft. Their simulation played out with mathematical precision. Energy constructs representing their forces moved across the holographic battlefield in perfect coordination, striking multiple targets simultaneously. The Void Syndicate defenses, formidable as they were, couldn't withstand the concentrated assault. Civilian casualties, 437, the trial master announced when their simulation concluded. Mission completion time, 6 hours, 22 minutes. Respectful silence greeted the result. Losing less than 500 civilians out of 12,000 was considered excellent for such a complex scenario. The Vorthan Empire's approach was more methodical. Commander Zarathek personally directed their strategy, using their species' natural advantages in multi-limbed coordination to manage complex supply lines, while their assault teams carved systematic paths through the enemy defenses. Civilian casualties 312, the trial master reported. Mission completion time 7 hours, 14 minutes. The Vorthan delegation erupted in proud cheers. Their casualty count was the lowest yet achieved, despite the longer time frame. Then the Krex warriors stepped forward, and battle leader Grexmol's strategy was exactly what everyone expected. Overwhelming violence applied with surgical precision. Simultaneous assault on all defensive positions, he growled. No mercy for Void Syndicate forces, fastest extraction possible. The simulation showed Krex forces smashing through enemy lines like a tsunami of armored destruction. Enemy ships were torn apart by Krex battleclaws. Weapon platforms were reduced to debris, and the siege was broken through sheer, unstoppable force. Civilian casualties 191, the trial master announced. Mission completion time 4 hours 7 minutes. The arena erupted in roars of approval. The Krex had achieved both the lowest casualties and the fastest time, demonstrating why they were considered the galaxy's premier assault specialists. As the human team approached the tactical display, the mood shifted. After their mysterious success in the Shadow Maze, many aliens watched with new uncertainty. What had appeared to be random luck was beginning to look more like deliberate planning. Captain Chen stood before the holographic battlefield with Master Yamamoto at her side. To the watching aliens, they appeared to be studying the scenario with the same confusion and uncertainty they had shown during previous challenges. 8 hours to save. 12,000 people, one of the humans said, loudly enough for the alien spectators to hear. Those defensive positions look impossible to break through. Ambassador Kreltik leaned forward in his seat. His species' evolved pattern recognition abilities focused intently on the human team. Unlike the warrior species around him, he was watching for subtleties rather than obvious displays of force. What he saw troubled him. The humans weren't actually studying the battlefield layout. They were communicating through microscopic gestures that were almost impossible to detect. Their apparent confusion was perfectly choreographed, and their body language suggested they had already formulated a complete strategy. Interesting approach, Captain Chen announced finally. We'll try something different. Instead of announcing a direct assault like the other teams, the humans began what appeared to be a scattered, uncoordinated approach to the problem. Small groups of their simulation forces moved toward seemingly random points on the battlefield, avoiding the major defensive concentrations entirely. What are they doing? Commander Zarathek asked, her voice carrying genuine puzzlement. They're not attacking any critical targets. The human simulation forces appeared to be wandering aimlessly around the edges of the battlefield, occasionally making contact with minor Void Syndicate patrols, but avoiding any significant engagements. To the watching aliens, it looked like another display of human incompetence. But Ambassador Kreltik noticed something the warriors missed. The random movements weren't random at all. The human forces were systematically identifying and eliminating communication relays, supply lines, and command nodes that the other teams had ignored entirely. They're not trying to break the siege, he whispered to his aide. They're dismantling it from within. While the alien teams had focused on destroying the obvious defensive positions, the humans were targeting the infrastructure that made those positions effective. Communication networks went dark one by one. Supply convoys disappeared without trace. Command centers lost contact with their subordinate units. The Void Syndicate defenses, which had withstood direct assault from 3 different galactic powers, began to collapse from internal confusion. Defensive positions that had seemed impregnable suddenly found themselves isolated, unsupported, and uncertain of their orders. Master Yamamoto's students moved through the simulation like ghosts, striking targets that the enemy didn't even know were vulnerable. They turned the Void Syndicate's own defensive network against itself, using captured communication equipment to send false orders and create chaos in the enemy ranks. The primary shield generators are dropping, General Thaxor observed, his voice carrying a note of confusion. But the humans never attacked them directly. They convinced the defenders to shut them down themselves, Ambassador Kreltic realized with growing amazement. They're using deception and misdirection instead of brute force. The rescue operation that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of fighting their way through enemy positions, the human simulation forces simply walked through gaps in the defensive perimeter that they had created through sabotage and subterfuge. Enemy ships that should have been firing on the rescue craft were, instead, hunting for infiltrators that seemed to vanish the moment they were detected. Civilian casualties, 0, the trial master announced. The silence that followed was absolute. In the entire history of the strategy simulation, no team had ever achieved 0 civilian casualties. The mathematical models suggested it was impossible. Mission completion time, 2 hours, 43 minutes. The impossible had become routine. The humans had not only saved every civilian, they had done it faster than anyone thought possible. High Priestess Vexara's dark energy form flickered with what could only be described as fear. How, she demanded. The simulation is based on actual historical events. We know it's impossible to achieve 0 casualties in that scenario. Captain Chen looked up at the galleries with an expression of innocent surprise, as if she couldn't understand why everyone seemed so shocked. We just followed the path of least resistance, she said simply. But the galaxy's greatest military minds were beginning to understand that they had seriously underestimated these humans. The path of least resistance, when applied by minds trained in the arts of deception and misdirection, could reshape the entire battlefield. Phase 5 erupted into existence with a thunderous announcement that shook the arena's crystal foundations. Multi-species combat engagement, the trial master declared, his ancient voice carrying ominous weight. All remaining teams will engage simultaneously in direct combat until only one remains victorious. The arena floor transformed into a complex battlefield featuring multiple terrain types: urban ruins that provided cover and elevation, swampland that would slow most species, crystalline formations that could be used as weapons, and open plains where raw speed and power would determine survival. Battle leader Grexmol flexed his massive claws as he surveyed the battlefield. Finally, he growled with satisfaction. No more puzzles or tricks. Just honest combat where strength determines victory. The remaining teams took their positions, the Krex warriors with their impenetrable armor and devastating physical power, the Vorthan strike force with their four-armed coordination and tactical expertise, the crystalline Confederation's energy beings capable of phasing through matter, and the humans who had somehow survived 4 phases despite their apparent weakness. Commander Zarathek watched from the galleries as her team deployed across the arena floor. The humans will be eliminated within minutes, she predicted confidently. Direct combat is where their limitations become fatal. As the battle commenced, the predictions seemed accurate. The Krex warriors charged across the open plains like living siege engines, their armored hides deflecting energy blasts, while their claws tore through defensive positions. The Vorthons used their superior numbers and coordination to establish overlapping fields of fire, their forearms allowing them to operate multiple weapons simultaneously. The crystalline Confederation forces phased in and out of solid matter, appearing behind enemy positions to deliver devastating energy attacks before vanishing again. Their translucent forms shimmered across the battlefield like deadly mirages, and the humans scattered. Look at them run, laughed Admiral Korlex as he watched. The human team break apart and flee in different directions. So much for their mysterious competence. The 12 humans appeared to panic under the initial assault, abandoning any semblance of coordinated strategy as they sought cover among the arena's various terrain features. Several disappeared into the urban ruins, others vanished into the swampland, and a few seemed to melt away among the crystalline formations. What the watching aliens saw was a complete rout. What Master Yamamoto and his students were actually executing was a deployment pattern that had been perfected over centuries of ninja warfare. The first indication that something was wrong came when a Krex warrior simply stopped. He had been charging toward the swampland, where 2 humans had fled, but now he stood motionless in the middle of the battlefield. His armor showed no signs of damage. His vital signs remained strong, but he was no longer responding to commands. "What's wrong with Grextal?" Battle leader Grexmal demanded, his voice carrying across the communication channels. The fallen warrior remained frozen in place for several seconds before collapsing forward onto the arena floor. Medical scanners revealed that he was alive but unconscious, with tiny puncture wounds in his neck that had somehow penetrated his supposedly impregnable armor. "Impossible," General Thaxor rumbled. "Krex armor has never been penetrated by projectile weapons." But Ambassador Kreltik was studying the tactical displays more carefully. "The puncture occurred at the junction point between helmet and chest armor," he observed. Someone found the exact gap in his defenses. Before anyone could process this information fully, a Vorthan soldier stumbled and fell in the urban ruins. Like the Krex warrior, he showed no signs of external damage but was completely incapacitated. Then another Krex fell, followed by a crystalline Confederation energy being whose form suddenly destabilized and collapsed. "Where are the attacks coming from?" Commander Zarathek demanded. "Our sensors aren't detecting any weapons fire." The battlefield had become eerily quiet. The remaining alien warriors found themselves looking over their shoulders, searching for enemies they couldn't see or detect. The humans had completely vanished from all tracking systems, yet their opponents continued to fall one by one. A Vorthan soldier aimed his energy rifle at the crystalline formations, where he thought he had seen movement. As he prepared to fire, a shadow detached itself from the crystal behind him. What appeared to be empty air suddenly solidified into human form, and Master Yamamoto's blade found the exact nerve cluster that would incapacitate a Vorthan without permanent injury. The soldier collapsed before he even realized he had been attacked. "Did you see that?" High Priestess Vexara's voice crackled with disbelief. The human materialized out of nothing. But even as she spoke, Master Yamamoto had already vanished again, becoming one with the shadows among the crystal formations. His students moved through the battlefield like deadly ghosts, striking with surgical precision before melting back into invisibility. The crystalline Confederation forces tried to use their phasing abilities to escape, but they discovered that the humans had somehow anticipated this tactic. Sensei Tanaka emerged from what appeared to be solid rock, moving through the crystal formations as if they were empty air, intercepting phasing energy beings with techniques that shouldn't have been possible. "They're matching our phasing capabilities," Admiral Korlex observed in shock. "How can solid matter beings move through crystal like we do?" The answer lay in centuries of ninja training in mountain caves, where practitioners learned to find and exploit microscopic gaps in seemingly solid stone. What appeared to be magic was actually perfect understanding of physics applied with inhuman precision. Battle leader Grexmal, the largest and most experienced of the Krex warriors, finally managed to corner one of the humans in the open plains. The human appeared to be a young woman, small even by human standards, who looked utterly helpless facing the 3-meter-tall armored giant. "Finally," Grexmal roared, raising his massive claws. "Let's see you vanish from this." Michiko Sato stood perfectly still as the Krex warrior charged toward her, her slight frame dwarfed by his approaching bulk. To the watching aliens, it looked like certain death for the human. Instead, at the last possible second, she seemed to flow like water around his attack. Grexmal's claws, which could tear through battle tank armor, struck only empty air. Michiko had moved with such fluidity that the arena's high-speed cameras could barely track her motion. Before the Krex warrior could turn around, she had scaled his armored back like a spider, found the precise pressure point at the base of his skull, and delivered a strike that shut down his nervous system without causing permanent damage. The mightiest warrior in the Krex military, toppled like a felled tree. "Impossible," General Thaxor whispered, his voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. No being that small should be able to generate enough force to affect a Krex warrior. But force wasn't what had defeated battle leader Grexmol. Knowledge was. Michiko had spent 3 years studying galactic anatomy, learning the exact points where every species was vulnerable, mastering techniques that required no strength at all, only perfect precision and timing. One by one, the remaining alien warriors fell to techniques they had never encountered and couldn't comprehend. The Vorthons discovered that their four-armed advantage meant nothing when facing opponents who could predict their movements with supernatural accuracy. The Crystalline Confederation learned that energy beings were just as vulnerable to nervous system disruption as organic creatures. When the dust settled, 12 humans stood alone on the battlefield, surrounded by unconscious but unharmed alien warriors. They had achieved total victory without killing or permanently injuring a single opponent. The arena fell into absolute silence as the implications sank in. The species that had been mocked as weak and primitive had just defeated the galaxy's 3 most powerful military forces simultaneously. Captain Chen looked up at the galleries where thousands of alien spectators sat in stunned disbelief. "Phase 5 complete," she announced calmly, as if the impossible had been routine. The silence that followed Phase 5 stretched across the arena like a physical weight. Thousands of the galaxy's most experienced military leaders sat motionless in their viewing galleries, struggling to process what they had witnessed. The species they had dismissed as primitives had just achieved the impossible. General Thaxor was the first to break the silence, his massive frame rising slowly from his seat. "Trial Master," he said, his voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. "We demand an explanation. Those humans displayed capabilities that should be impossible for their species." The Trial Master's ancient eyes surveyed the arena floor where the unconscious alien warriors were being revived by medical teams. "What explanation do you require, General?" "The humans completed Phase 5 according to the established rules. The rules assume honest representation of species capabilities," Commander Zarathek interjected, her forearms gesturing emphatically. "These humans clearly possess enhancements or abilities they failed to declare." Admiral Korlex's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. "No natural evolution produces stealth capabilities of that magnitude. They must be using advanced technology or genetic modifications." Captain Chen stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly across the arena. "We are using no technology beyond what we declared, and we have undergone no genetic modifications. Everything you witnessed represents natural human capabilities developed through training." "Impossible," High Priestess Vexara hissed, her dark energy form crackling with disbelief. "No species develops such abilities through training alone." Master Yamamoto moved to stand beside Captain Chen, his weathered face showing the calm confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime perfecting his arts. "Honored representatives," he said, bowing respectfully. "Perhaps the galaxy has forgotten that strength is not always measured in raw power." The Trial Master raised one ancient hand, commanding attention. "Phase 6 will commence," he announced. "Individual combat assessment. Each team may select their finest warrior for single combat against opponents of their choosing." The implications hit the alien spectators immediately. After what they had witnessed, none of their warriors wanted to face the humans in individual combat. Yet the combat trials required completion of all phases. Battle leader Grexmol, still shaky from his encounter with Michiko, stepped forward nonetheless. His pride as a Krex warrior wouldn't allow him to show fear, even though he had never experienced defeat so complete and incomprehensible. "I challenge the human who defeated me," he declared, pointing directly at Michiko. "Let us see if her tricks work twice." Michiko bowed respectfully and stepped into the center of the arena. At barely 5 feet tall and weighing perhaps half what a Krex child would weigh, she looked absurdly mismatched against the 3-meter armored giant. This time, however, battle leader Grexmol had learned from his previous defeat. Instead of charging blindly, he approached cautiously, using his superior reach to probe for weaknesses while keeping his vulnerable points protected. What he discovered was that learning from the previous encounter had been exactly the wrong strategy. Michiko had also learned from their previous fight, and her capacity for adaptation far exceeded his. Where before she had used his momentum against him, Now she employed completely different techniques. She moved like smoke around his careful attacks, striking nerve clusters he hadn't known he possessed, using pressure points that Kreck's anatomy techs claimed didn't exist. The battle lasted less than 30 seconds. When it ended, battle leader Grexmol lay unconscious again, this time defeated by entirely different methods than before. Commander Zarathek felt a chill run through her scaled hide. She adapted her entire fighting style in real time, she whispered. She learned his countermeasures and developed new techniques while fighting. Admiral Korlex's challenge came next, and he chose to face Captain Chen herself. As an energy being, he possessed capabilities that physical matter couldn't match. The ability to become intangible, to generate lethal electrical discharges, and to move at the speed of light itself. Captain Chen stood calmly in the arena's center as the crystalline entity materialized around her, his translucent form shifting between solid and energy states. When he attacked, it was with the accumulated knowledge of a species that had transcended physical limitations millennia ago. Chen moved like water, flowing around energy discharges that should have been impossible to dodge. When Admiral Korlex became intangible to avoid her counterattacks, she somehow anticipated exactly where he would resolidify and was waiting for him. The galaxy's military leaders watched in growing alarm as Chen demonstrated techniques that seemed to violate the laws of physics. She struck pressure points on an energy being that shouldn't have pressure points. She anticipated movement patterns that should have been impossible to predict. She adapted to capabilities she had never encountered before. When Admiral Korlex fell unconscious, his energy form destabilizing into a harmless crystalline sculpture, the arena erupted in panicked conversations. How? General Thaxor demanded. How can they adapt so quickly to completely alien fighting styles? Master Yamamoto stepped forward to answer. Your species have grown powerful through specialization, he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of accumulated wisdom. You have developed single strengths to extraordinary levels. But humans develop something different. He gestured to his students who stood silently around the arena floor. We learn to learn. We develop the ability to understand and adapt to any situation, any opponent, any challenge. What you call impossible, we call Tuesday's training exercise. High Priestess Vexara rose from her seat, her dark energy form towering over the arena. Enough demonstrations, she declared. I challenge all of them simultaneously. Let us see if their adaptability works against true power. She descended to the arena floor, her form growing larger and darker as she drew upon the full extent of her species' abilities. The Shadow Realm inhabitants were beings of pure darkness and malevolent energy, capable of attacks that existed in dimensions most species couldn't even perceive. What followed was not so much a battle as a masterclass in human adaptability. The 12 humans didn't fight the High Priestess. They studied her. Every attack she launched was met not with resistance but with understanding. They learned the patterns of her dimensional manipulations, deciphered the frequency of her energy discharges, and mapped the psychological triggers that drove her combat behavior. Within minutes, they were fighting her with techniques borrowed from her own species, adapted and improved through human innovation. They turned her dimensional attacks back on her, used her own energy patterns against her, and exploited weaknesses in her fighting style that she didn't know she possessed. When High Priestess Vexara collapsed, her dark energy form dissipating into harmless shadows, the arena fell into complete silence. The humans hadn't just defeated the galaxy's most powerful warriors, they had learned to become better versions of those warriors in the process. General Thaxor stood slowly, his massive frame trembling with an emotion none of his species had felt in millennia. Fear. What are you? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Master Yamamoto looked up at the galleries where thousands of alien military leaders sat in stunned silence. We are what happens when a species learns that true strength comes not from what you are, but from what you can become. The implications hung in the air like a sword over the galaxy's head. These humans weren't just warriors. They were evolution in action, adaptation personified, the living embodiment of a species that had turned learning itself into their greatest weapon. Phase 7, the final phase, still awaited. And for the first time in galactic history, every military power in the arena was afraid to see what would come next. Phase 7 materialized around the arena with an ominous finality that made even the trial master pause. The final challenge was unlike anything that had come before. Instead of a test of specific capabilities, it was a simulation of the galaxy's greatest nightmare, invasion by the Void Syndicate's ultimate weapon. The arena floor transformed into a perfect replica of the galactic core worlds under siege. Massive holographic displays showed enemy fleets that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever faced, commanded by an artificial intelligence that had learned from every previous galactic conflict and adapted beyond all countermeasures. "This is the Omega Protocol," the trial master announced, his ancient voice carrying grim weight. "The simulation that has never been successfully completed. It represents the theoretical maximum threat our galaxy might face." The alien spectators fell silent as they recognized the scenario. The Omega Protocol had been designed by combining the tactical knowledge of every galactic species, creating an enemy that knew all their strengths and could exploit all their weaknesses. No single species had ever lasted more than 4 hours against it. General Thaxor leaned forward in his seat, his massive frame tense with anticipation. "Even working together, our combined fleets have never achieved victory in this simulation," he said quietly. "The enemy adapts faster than we can develop new strategies." Commander Zarathek nodded grimly. "The longest any alliance has survived is 6 hours and 17 minutes. The simulation enemy learns from every move we make and turns our own tactics against us." On the arena floor, Captain Chen studied the holographic displays showing the approaching enemy forces. The Void Syndicate AI commanded fleets that numbered in the millions, supported by weapon systems that could destroy entire star systems, and guided by tactical intelligence that had absorbed the military knowledge of countless conquered civilizations. "Your orders, Captain?" Master Yamamoto asked quietly. Chen looked up at the galleries where thousands of alien military leaders waited to see how humanity would face the ultimate test. Many of them were no longer mocking. The previous phases had taught them to fear what humans might be capable of. But fear and respect were different things. "Standard deployment," she replied. "But this time, we don't hide what we are." For the first time since entering the arena, the 12 humans moved with their true capabilities on full display. The aliens watching suddenly understood that everything they had witnessed before had been carefully controlled demonstrations. Now they were seeing what humans looked like when they stopped pretending to be weak. Master Yamamoto and his students flowed across the simulated battlefield like living weapons, their movements so perfectly coordinated that they seemed to share a single mind. They didn't engage the enemy directly. Instead, they began doing what humans did best, learning. But this time, they were learning from the enemy itself. The Void Syndicate AI had been programmed with the tactical knowledge of dozens of species, making it virtually unbeatable through conventional warfare. What it hadn't been programmed for was an enemy that could observe its patterns, understand its programming, and begin to think like it did. "They're not fighting the simulation," Ambassador Kreltic observed, his voice filled with growing amazement. "They're studying it." The humans moved through the holographic battlefield like scholars in a library, cataloging every enemy response, analyzing every tactical decision, and mapping the artificial intelligence's decision-making process. They turned the simulation into a classroom where they learned to understand their opponent better than it understood itself. Admiral Corlex's crystalline form pulsed with confusion. "The enemy adapts to counter every strategy. How can they hope to find something it can't counter?" Master Yamamoto's voice carried clearly across the arena as he answered. "Simple. We don't find something it can't counter. We become something it can't understand." What followed was unlike any military engagement in galactic history. The humans didn't fight the Void Syndicate AI. They taught it to fight itself. They introduced false patterns into their behavior that caused the AI to develop countermeasures against strategies they weren't actually using. They fed it information that led it to optimize against weaknesses they didn't possess, while ignoring the strengths they were actually deploying. The artificial intelligence, designed to learn from every encounter, found itself learning the wrong lessons. It adapted perfectly to counter an enemy that didn't exist, while remaining vulnerable to attacks it couldn't comprehend. "They're rewriting the AI's programming through behavioral manipulation," High Priestess Vexara whispered, her reformed energy body crackling with disbelief. "They're teaching a machine intelligence to defeat itself." The humans had turned the simulation's greatest strength into its fatal weakness. The more the AI learned from them, the more confused it became. They were feeding it a curriculum in human warfare that led to conclusions that made perfect sense individually, but created complete chaos when combined. 6 hours into the simulation, longer than any species had ever survived, the Void Syndicate AI began making tactical errors. 7 hours in, it started contradicting its own strategic decisions. 8 hours in, its fleets were attacking each other because different subroutines had learned incompatible lessons about human behavior. At 9 hours and 43 minutes, the artificial intelligence achieved something that its programmers had believed impossible. It became confused enough by human tactics to defeat itself completely. Victory achieved, the trial master announced, his ancient voice carrying amazement for the first time in millennia. The Omega Protocol has been completed successfully. The silence that followed was absolute. Every military leader in the galaxy sat motionless, struggling to comprehend what they had witnessed. The humans hadn't just defeated the ultimate simulation, they had redefined what victory looked like. General Thaxor rose slowly from his seat, his massive frame somehow looking smaller than before. "How long?" he asked quietly. "How long what, General?" Captain Chen replied. "How long have your species possessed these capabilities?" Master Yamamoto stepped forward, his weathered face showing the calm dignity of someone who had spent a lifetime mastering the impossible. "We have been developing these arts for over 1,000 years, he said simply. "What you call impossible, we call the foundation of human civilization." Commander Zarathek's voice carried across the arena, filled with a mixture of awe and fear. "Your entire species? Are they all capable of this?" "Every human child learns some form of these arts," Chen confirmed. "Adaptation, learning, and growth are not special abilities for us. They are basic survival skills." The implications hit the alien spectators like a physical blow. They hadn't been watching an elite military unit, they had been watching what ordinary humans could accomplish. When properly trained, the trial master's ancient form straightened as he addressed the assembled representatives. "The combat trials are complete. The species known as humans has demonstrated capabilities that exceed all previous standards. Their application for membership in the Galactic Military Alliance is approved." But the word approved seemed inadequate for what had transpired. The humans hadn't just qualified for alliance membership, they had revolutionized the galaxy's understanding of what warfare could become. Admiral Corlex floated down from his observation pod, his crystalline form approaching Captain Chen with something approaching reverence. We may have been wrong about your species," he said slowly. "We would be honored to call you allies." Captain Chen looked up at the galleries where thousands of alien military leaders now regarded humanity with a mixture of respect, fear, and hope. "The honor is ours," she replied. "We look forward to learning from you." Those 5 words, "we look forward to learning," sent a shiver through every military mind present. They had just witnessed what humans could accomplish after learning from a few hours of observation. The thought of what they might become after years of studying galactic military arts was both thrilling and terrifying. As the combat trials concluded and the human delegation prepared to leave the arena, Master Yamamoto paused to bow once more toward the assembled representatives. It was a gesture of respect but also a promise. The galaxy had wanted to test humanity's worthiness as allies. Instead, they had discovered something far more significant. They had found teachers who could show them that the IT limits they believed in were nothing more than failures of imagination. The age of human integration into galactic civilization was about to begin, and nothing would ever be the same.